Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack, back again to bring you my experiences, my guide for soloing as a priest, as a holy or discipline, the Twisting Corridors Layer 8. So I went through this in about 2 days. Every single layer, I did some of them as holy, some of them as disc. My final layer 8 was as discipline. But holy and disc play very similarly, and we'll get into that, of course. So I wanted to kind of lump them both in together as a guide to talk about the general strategy, how to kind of set yourself up. Personally, I never failed any of the wings at any of the layers at all, but I did have some that were a little bit scarier than others that I almost failed. So we're going to go over some of that stuff too. Full disclosure, Venari also sells you some permanent Torghast upgrades. If you have a lot of these, if you've been keeping up with the mod, this should be really easy. Personally, I only had the one called the Extra Dimensional Pockets and the Vessel of Unfortunate Spirits. So my first death never counted, which obviously I don't think is that big of a deal. But the second one I think is pretty significant. It's a permanent Torghast upgrade, which allows the Obleron powers to be used in higher amounts. And the Oblerons are like, here's plus haste, here's plus stamina, here's plus mastery, whatever, right? That's pretty much all it is. I do think that's actually very significant, and we'll go into that as well. But first, let's start talking about what Twisting Corridors is. There is going to be 18 floors, which is a ridiculous amount, by the way. And every six floors, you have a chance to go to a new wing. So Twisting Corridors mixes all of the other Torghast wings that you've been doing so far, lumping them all into one. So every 6 floors, you have a chance to go to a different area, basically. You can also keep getting the same one over and over. I had one of my runs where I had Soul Forges back to back to back. And each of these wings has a torment attached to it. Some of them will have like the dogs that spawn. The one for the Soul Forges, for example, makes you take ticking damage based off your max health, which is both good and bad. And there's a variety of them for each of the different wings. For Upper Reaches, Mortragar, Cold Heart, Interstitia, etc. So depending on what's going on, that's the thing you have to keep in mind. And depending on what wing you're doing, it's always really important to understand some of the priority targets. In Cold Heart, it's the agents that will fear. In Soul Forges, you have the Flame Tenders that have the Inner Flames that heal all the allies. There's a ton of different mobs that you really have to watch out for, but pretty much in each wing, there's like one that you need to single target focus every single time. So going through it, the first 10 to 12 floors are actually very easy if you just pretty much take it slow. If you don't over pull, if you don't over commit, if you find that one mob in the pack that you have to be able to kill, it's totally fine. Personally, I preferred running disc for this because it's a lot easier to get more damage out of your dots. It's a lot easier to be able to like Mind Seer, AoE everything down. Holy Nova, if you're playing Holy Priest, is kind of weak for that. And in general, your shields aren't as strong because Holy's Mastery doesn't really do anything for your absorbs, whereas Disc Mastery does. But that being said, again, your win conditions are very much the same. One of the things I've seen a lot of happen from different players is they start orienting their builds so that they can just mass trash pull and just blast their way to the end. Really, the big priority when you're going through these different floors is, especially for floors 1 through 12, is killing everything, grabbing all the powers that you can, and focusing on stamina. Stamina is like the bedrock for all of your win conditions. Having more health is just going to make it so that you can take bigger hits, you can survive the incoming damage, and you can dish it back out with your win conditions. Your win conditions are 3 of the epic powers. 2 of the epic powers and 1 rare power. You have Catharstick, which the damage that you take, you can just blast back at your opponent through the use of Urge the Wicked. That one's always fantastic. And it is your best power. If you get multiple Catharsticks, it's just stacking up the damage more rapidly, whereas only one is just 20% of the damage that you take. And I think it's like 20% every single time. So getting multiple Catharsticks is very good because it just really ramps up your DPS so that you're going to be able to just like boom, one shot, boom, one shot, boom, one shot over and over and over again. And that makes it just a hell of a lot easier to be able to get through trash, right? Some of the other win conditions is very popular, for example, to take the Volatile Phantasm. I do think that this power is very good. However, there's a bit of a caveat to it. The Fade Explosion and everything like that is very strong for helping you clear trash, but it's often a momentary distraction. So while I think it's absolutely very much a priority to go after, it's not as important as Catharstick. Scales of Trauma is also going to be the other one. Scales, of course, is whenever you are healing yourself with Flash Shield, or if you're Disc with Shadow Mend. The next Mind Blast, or if you're Holy Fire, will deal damage based off of what you healed yourself for. And again, the cap to Scales of Trauma, the cap to Catharstick, and I believe the health of the Volatile Phantasm are based off of your maximum health. So by the end of it, you really want to be able to have all three. My personal priority, if you start having to choose between one or the other, I would absolutely choose Catharstick first, then the Volatile Phantasm, and then Scales of Trauma. The reasoning for this is, again, Catharstick can be instant, it stacks up, vastly increasing your damage. It's just a global, it doesn't really require any other preparation, you just need to live. Phantasm's good, but when you're getting mobbed by the boss, for example, when you're dealing with the end bosses, they don't really deal a lot of damage to those. It's extremely helpful for some trash. But again, if you're able to just get a ton of Catharsticks and just blast all the way down, then you're in great shape. I think Scales of Trauma takes up the third place slot because it does take some time to charge up, which can be good, but it also is very rapidly, I think, expended. So when you have to deal with a boss fight, for example, you can blast that, but then you have to just stop, heal yourself up all over again, and then cast it again. Whereas Catharstick is just slamming it down all the time. All three of them are fantastic, keep in mind, but if I had to choose, that would be the relative rankings that I would have. But before you can get into a lot of those other powers, you're going to be mixing around a lot of the gray, sometimes blue, sometimes green powers out there. Some of the biggest ones, like I said, the ones that you need to be focusing on, though, is Obleron Endurance, Secret Spices. Secret Spices, whenever you kill Maw Rats, you increase your maximum health. And then the Thick Burlap Sash. Obleron Endurance is just regular stamina. Burlap Sash, whenever you Fortitude yourself. Remember, you have to reapply Power of Fortitude, but you get additional stamina off that. Maw Rat, Spices, more Maw Rats you kill, the more max health that you have. All three of these are very important. I believe the Obleron Endurance gives you the most, but whenever you have the option, I would heavily recommend buying these specific powers from the vendor, if possible. If you're like low on Phantasm and you have to choose between them, I'd definitely recommend getting those specific powers early, frequently, to be able to get the job done. It is very tempting to go after, for example, Bloating Fodder. And while I don't think that Bloating Fodder is bad, Maw Rat detonations are really nice. The big thing to keep in mind about it is that it doesn't do anything for you on the boss fight. The end boss fight at the very end doesn't do anything for you. A lot of times, I had it happen almost every single run. I would have an Anima cell that would pop up that would only give me the option to go after Bloating Fodder. So more often than not, I ended up getting it, but I tried to not target it as much as I possibly could. That also brings me to Reflective Shield and Cruelty Sensor. These are both very, very good powers that you're going to be able to have access to, and they pop up a number of different times. So personally for me, I avoided these until later on, but they pretty quickly stacked up on their own because they just kept on appearing over and over and over again. So Cruelty Sensor, whenever you fear targets, they just take more damage, which is excellent for setting up one-shots. Reflective Shield, the more damage they deal to you, that reflects the shield damage back. So if you guys wanted to take a look, here's my power list that I had for my full run. I had about 12 Obleron Endurances, I had 5 Cruelty Sensors, I ended up with 5 Reflective Shields. I also ended up with some that I just didn't care about, which is like longer fear durations, for example, you know. But I got my Volatile Phantasm, I got my Scales of Trauma, but I only got one Catharstick. Some of the best runs that I've had lots and lots of Catharsticks going on throughout it. So if you can, I would definitely recommend that you go after it, and definitely recommend you try to be able to get yourself some heavy amounts of Catharstick to kind of help guarantee that you're going to be able to get more rapid one-shots. You know, I have like some life barriers in there, some mastery increases in there to help make my shield stronger. One of the big things with Reflective Shield is it's not really that great Actually, it's pretty bad in early levels. I'll just say it's bad on early levels, but it gets really strong once you hit floor number 12. That's when everything just starts ramping up in terms of health. You need to make sure you remind yourself as best as you can once you get to like floor 11, floor 12, really start slowing down on a lot of those pulls, and make sure that you're not going to be being too aggressive, because it's easy to start stacking up some of those deaths a lot of the times. Once again, some of the other big relevant powers and everything that I was going for, there was a rare power for Gloriousness. Whenever you're dealing holy damage, it has a chance to stun some enemies. I found whenever I was getting into very troubling situations, if I could just spam some Holy Novas to try to run away and get some stuns out onto the mobs, get separation, and then I'd be okay. Horrific Dictionary is a very good one. Whenever the holy spells, holy word spells, power word spells that you cast, you get more intellect. You can actually, if you're playing Holy, you can switch to Disc, or Disc, you can switch to Holy whenever you're at the broker rest areas, and then you can cast the respective holy words or power words for the other spec in that rest area, and then you can spec swap back. It has to be in that rested area, but you can do it that way, and that'll get you a couple extra stacks of the intellect, which again is just great for helping you sort of clear out trash and setting up better one-shots. So depending on what sort of build that you have, you always want to be able to, like I said, prioritize stamina, prioritize Catharstick, as I think that's the most efficient and most consistent win condition, because when you're really in trouble, you just blast the thing that's hurting you the most. For example, if you're in like Cold Hard Interstitia and you have those giant beefy owls, right? Those guys absolutely destroy you, amongst many other mobs, you know. If you have like the Flame Tenders that you want to be able to eliminate quickly, the Agents that you want to eliminate quickly, there's a number of different mobs. The Tower Sentinels, for example, deal a lot of damage. There's a lot of the different ones, but being able to just specifically target it, instantly kill it, stop that problem, and then be able to get away helps a crazy amount. Early powers, I think, that are sort of a trap that I see people take are things like Pain Wheel, Bloating Fodder, some of the Shadow or Death ones, which are not necessarily bad, but I don't think that they do enough for you compared to stamina. So the way I did it was I passed on a lot of powers that would help you at early floors to just go faster and kill mobs faster, in exchange for ones that made me have more HP and feel more secure when I got to the last boss. My layer 7 run, I think, was absolute perfection. It's not featured here because I wanted to show the layer 8 for disc, but I think the layer 7 run, I had like 500,000 or 600,000 health, for example, and I just blasted everything and it just died instantly at the end. You know, the boss fight was not a problem at all. The layer 6 run, however, I had about 90k health, and I somehow was able to struggle bust through the last boss. It was the scariest run I had. I tried to prioritize as much stamina as I could, and I just couldn't. So that's where the Fade Epic, for example, came into really, really good play for me, as not only will it distract the boss for that at least 10 seconds, you know, if you have any of the cooldown reduction, it can make it, you know, very consistent, where you're just hitting it on cooldown and it never hits you. But you also have to deal with the incoming damage, and that's where making sure you're able to target your Fade copy and shield it, and even shield it over and over again if you have like Rapture up or something, goes a really far way, in being able to make sure you're able to keep it alive long enough and start getting in some extra damage as well. Because sometimes some bosses you really can't afford to go toe-to-toe with, especially if you don't have a lot of stamina. So like I said, when I had my 90k health run, for example, I walked into the last boss and I immediately got hit for 20% of my health, and it procced my, you know, backup heal that happens once a floor. And so I just ran the rest of the time, and I leaned on my Fade and started shielding it as much as I could, and I leaned on whatever fear bombs I could drop with Cruelty Sensor to try to DPS it down. The fight took about a minute of me full kiting, and that was like a worst case scenario. Some of the general good case scenarios, however, have just been, like I said, on my layer 7, where I just one-shot the boss immediately, and on my layer 8, where I had to work it down a little bit, but I pretty much had, you know, a decent Catharstick. I had Flashbox, so I could top myself quickly, and take some advantage of Scales of Trauma, and I kind of just worked it down. My layer 8 was definitely not my best run, but it wasn't anything bad. Like I said, I had around 300k health going into the final boss, which I think is pretty average. Pretty par for the course, but Big principles: the more health that you can get, the easier of a run that you're going to be able to have. You're going to be able to set up really nice one-shots with Cruelty Sensor followed by Catharstick or Scales of Trauma. The Torments are really important to keep in mind. They come from the different wings that you go into, which makes me think that Soul Forges makes some of these runs extraordinarily easy. Soul Forges deals ticking damage every floor that you go up. So if your very first floor is Soul Forges, then as long as you are in Soul Forge wings, you will progressively take more ticking damage. But if it switches to a different wing, like Mortrigar, for example, you'll stay at 6 stacks of that ticking damage and it won't increase, and you'll start gaining higher torments for whatever Mortrigar has, right? But I had one run where I had crazy amounts of health, like 600-700k, and I just kept getting Soul Forges, and I had like 4 Catharsticks. So I was taking so much ticking damage that I didn't need to actually get hit by anybody else. I would just spam Purge the Wicked or Shadow or Pain on my enemies, and because my health kept dropping so much and I kept taking so much damage, I was able to reflect that damage effectively through Catharstick. So there's a number of different builds that can happen, and the wings can change a little bit, but the powers, whether you're holy or whether you're disciplined, remain very much the same. You want to be able to go after health. You want to be able to have sort of a masochism type build where you take damage and deal it back. Fade is an excellent power to help give you time, but it's often not what's going to kill everything for you. If you can pair it up with lots of reflective shields and life barriers and mastery increases, you can further bolster your power word shield, gaining your personal self and your Fade copy more effective health to be able to chew through, to be able to survive the incoming damage that gets dealt by all those mobs, meaning your explosions are larger from the Phantasm, and meaning you're getting more reflective shield value as well. Finding that sort of balance between being able to survive and not take 5 hours to be able to kill all of the enemies is very important. But for me, I went really slow at the beginning, and I sacrificed bonuses and didn't pursue certain bonuses early on in favor of more stamina whenever I could. So I later on ended up getting more bloating fodder and pain wheels, but I didn't immediately pursue them because I knew that I'd need as much health as I could to most consistently get through all of those layers. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up. If you'd like to see the entire, very long highlight, it took about 2 hours to do. It was about an hour and a half average for the runs. Sometimes on lower layers, you just hit the jackpot and you can just blitz your way through the runs, which is fantastic. I had, like I said, runs where I had multiple Catharsticks, multiple fades, or sorry, a fade and multiple cooldown reductions with the fade, and I just like ran right through it and one-shot everything, and that was fine. But that's not really realistic, so like I said, the more that you're able to just grab those stamina bonuses, even if it costs you, for example, some of the more intellect, even if it costs you like Purge the Wicked damage, a lot of those stamina bonuses will make you more consistent, more tanky, and more safe as you go into the later wings where everything hurts terribly. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them down in the comment section below. If you want to check out the full VODs, like I said, be sure to check out my stream, also linked there as well. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope you all enjoyed it. Hope you all found it educational. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch y'all next time.